One eternity later.
Hello! You're watching License to Game, where today we're going to talk about the Tokyo 2020 Olympic video game. Now, I know Tokyo 2020 ended back in August, and at the time of this video's release, we're going to be closer to the start of the Winter Olympics in Beijing, but I've had my reasons for this video being so delayed. Despite that, I still wanted to cover this for my first video. Why? Well, for as long as I can remember, I've always loved watching the Olympic Games, and I've also loved playing the Olympic video games. Not only do they do a great job of allowing me to live my childhood fantasies of winning gold for my country despite having the athletic ability of a sloth, but they also let me play a myriad of different sports all in one package. So I was thrilled when I saw that Tokyo was getting a proper Olympic video game once again. Especially as Rio was the first in a while not to get one. Instead, they just got another release in the Mario and Sonic series. However, I quickly learned that Tokyo 2020 wasn't going to be your average Olympic video game.
You only have to look at the cover art to tell that this Olympic video game is not like the others. Here we have a cover art from some of the previous Olympic video games, and they all take a similar stylistic approach. Generic athletes in action poses for different sports with the game's logo in the middle. Now look at Tokyo 2020, and the first thing you'll be asking yourself is, they have astronauts in the Olympics? For the first time, you're able to fully customize your avatar to use across every sport in the game. When you first load up the game, you'll be asked to select the nation you want to represent, and then customize your avatar. After that, your avatar will feature in the title screen.
This is something I'm actually really happy they've finally done. Previous games would usually assign you a random avatar based on the sport that you picked. While yes, it added to that sense of realism, I always wanted to have my own character, so it felt like it was me winning the gold and not generic sprinter A.
As well as being able to make your own avatar, you can also fully customize the avatars of your squad in team-based sports. You can also change the stats of your character so they can specialize more in certain areas. Once your avatar is made, you're ready to compete in the Olympic Games.
That brings us to the second surprise of this game, the list of sports. Now, usually in an Olympic video game, you'd get every track, field and swimming event thrown in with a few random sports for good measure. Not here. The overall number of events in this game have been scaled back to just 18. That might sound like a lot, but London 2012's video game had 31 events for comparison. So how do these events hold up? Well, let's just say some hold up better than others.
For a start, the sports you can play are a lot more diverse compared to previous entries. Of course, there's still the sports you come to expect to be in an Olympic video game, like the 100 meters, the long jump, and freestyle swimming, but then there are many sports that are new, like football, BMX, and judo. Granted, if you've played the Mario and Sonic series, then some of these events won't sound new, but insofar as the simulation-style games go, these are all new.
And honestly, I think that's a good thing. If there was a common criticism across past Olympic video game entries, it was that a lot of the events were very similar and played very similar to each other, and as a result, they would quickly grow stale. That's probably one of the biggest strengths to this game. Each of the events control and play differently to each other.
If you've played an Olympic video game before, you'll likely be well aware that the cross and circle buttons on your controller will take an absolute beating because they are used to control 90% of the events. But in Tokyo 2020, while there are still some sports that involve button mashing, they're not all the same. Take, for example, the 100 meters. In this now, you just have to hammer away at cross before being given a directional arrow to also hammer away at halfway through for a final spurt. Now, when it comes to the 4x100 meter relay, you'd be forgiven for thinking at first that the controls are exactly the same. And to that, I would say,
Yes, but actually no.
yes, you still have to hammer away at that poor cross button. However, this time you have to do it more rhythmically, to keep it within a stamina gauge so you can pass it to your teammate with as much speed and momentum as possible. It's a subtle difference, but it's one that makes each event feel a bit more unique. As for the events themselves, they can be a bit of a mixed bag, but I feel as though there's something for everyone here. One thing that did stand out to me across all of them though is how in Tokyo 2020 they're leaning a lot more heavily into the arcade style of play rather than simulation, and if anything, it feels more like a Mario and Sonic game without the namesake mascots. Well, unless you've unlocked the Sonic costume like I did. Who else am I going to use to run the 100 meters? But going back to that arcade style of play, it's more than just the visuals, but the results of the events themselves. Take the hammer throw, arguably the easiest event in the game. The real-life world record for the hammer throw is 86.74 meters. Now watch this.
Amazing balance! Perfect! Nice throw!
Not only is this normal in this game, but necessary if you want to be in for a chance of medal contention by the time you get to the finals.
This is something I feel a little conflicted about. World records and Olympic records are just completely disregarded in this game, which takes out some of the authenticity of past entries. Not only that, you don't even get national anthems in the medal ceremonies. Just look!
Gold medalist and Olympic champion, Great Britain, the game changer.
Where's the anthems? Feels sacrilegious to not have it.
That being said, there are some perks to having a more arcade style. In some events your avatar can pull off special moves, which can look pretty awesome. In football, the camera pans to your avatar as they charge up a special shot looking like something out of galactic football. In rugby, your avatar goes full beast mode, and if you can make it to the try line, will score a try so spectacular it could arguably also put them in contention for a gymnastics medal. But my favourite, without a doubt, is in boxing, and the Build your special meter up to the max and you can use the special uppercut that guarantees a knockdown and looks oh so satisfying. Even if the animation is the same every time. But as cool as these special moves are, they are by no means a guarantee and can feel really anticlimactic when they don't go the way you want them to. More frustrating than the special moves though are Tokyo 2020's approach to controls. When looking up how to play before each event, you'll be led to think that it's very straightforward to play with not too many controls involved. What they don't tell you though is that there are also advanced controls. Honestly, once I realised they existed, it made me wonder why they couldn't just be upfront with it all in the first place with the game's tutorials, especially considering that some of them are vital if you want to succeed in the later rounds of each event. The same can also be said for the in-game hints. Not only do you have to unlock them, but if they don't show up in the loading screen, you have to go into the settings in order to actually read them, with some being more helpful than others. I get that they might have been trying to go for accessibility over complexity by trying not to overwhelm the player with controls, but they probably could have still put the advanced controls in the tutorial without making it come across any harder to play.
Talking of harder to play, damn, can this game get difficult? You'll find the events follow a similar pattern.
In the first round, the CPU is usually very easy to beat and doesn't pose any sort of a challenge. Then, in the semi-finals, they'll suddenly get good. This spike in difficulty can be more noticeable than others, but you'll definitely notice it as you're playing through the events, especially for the first time. Lose and you'll either have to start from the first round again, or you play the bronze medal match, depending on the sport. Win the semis or the bronze medal match and you'll make it to the finals, where the CPU gets harder again. Now, you might think winning that illustrious gold medal means you've beat the best that the game has to offer.
Well, you're wrong. You'll find there's an even harder opponent waiting for you in the most unlikely of places. The practice mode.
The practice mode will come across very unassuming before you win any of the events. But when you eventually do, you'll be notified that there's a star athlete waiting for you there, giving you the option to challenge them. Now, the game does try to hype these athletes a bit by giving them a banner and a cool little intimidating pose. Oh, and the announcer also boldly introduces them as
The unbeatable athlete.
Except, none of these athletes are actually real athletes. No, seriously, I googled the name of most of these unbeatable athletes and I couldn't find a single one that was a former Olympian or even a noteworthy name in their sport. I'm guessing it must have been a licensing issue, but it did amuse me a little. Nonetheless, what they lack in physical existence they make up for in virtual difficulty. Oh yeah, they're even harder than the gold medal events. In a way though, I kinda like it. For the events you enjoy, knowing that there's an even harder difficulty setting provides a good challenge for those that seek it. Also, it can be satisfying to see your avatar standing victorious next to them. Who's unbeatable now? You just lost to a guy dressed as Sonic the Hedgehog. It's not even the real deal.
But what if I've beaten all of the CPUs and grown bored of playing on my ones? Well, fear not. As well as local multiplayer, there's also online play.
Online in Tokyo 2020 is split into two parts. For those just wanting to jump in and play, you can do so via the Olympic Games mode. However, there is also a ranked mode. In ranked, you can play a rotation of 3 sports as you try to work your way up a lettered ranked ladder. Win games to gain points, lose games to lose points. I must say though that I do take issue with this rotation approach they've decided to take. My assumption is that in order to protect matchmaking and certain sports having larger lobbies than others, they make all of the sports run on a rotation. What that means, however, is if you want to play ranked in a specific sport, you have to be online during the time slot it's scheduled to come up. Sometimes that time slot can run for as little as 30 minutes. Now, the games have been and gone, and I honestly don't see the server surviving for much longer, especially with inconveniences like this thrown in to make it harder to play the sport you actually want to play. I couldn't actually capture any ranked gameplay in the end because I couldn't connect to a single match and I didn't save any gameplay from when I was playing this during the Olympics.
Tokyo 2020 is unlike any Olympic video game I've played before it. Whilst a lot of the previous games try to replicate the grandeur of the event itself, this feels a lot more like the wacky cousin. It takes a lot of inspiration from the Mario and Sonic series by taking a more whimsical approach to the Olympics. And honestly, I think it worked for the most part. Yes, it has its flaws, but this is probably the most personable Olympics video game I've ever played. And where it does get things right, it can be a fun experience. Tokyo Games were not your average Olympiad. With everything being held behind closed doors and COVID looming over it, the games lacked that buzzing atmosphere you're so used to seeing from other Olympics. In that way, the video game offered a bit of an escape in a way more than just crowds spectating the events. Ever wondered what it would be like to win the 100-meter freestyle whilst wearing full plate armor and looking like one of the Blades? Wonder no more. So here we are, the closing ceremony of the first episode of License to Game. Did you play Tokyo 2020? If you did, let me know what you thought down below. And of course, be sure to like, share and subscribe so you can flex that you were subscribed to License to Game before I was cool. Unless this has shown up in your recommended like 5 to 10 years down the line, in which case then be sure to like, share and subscribe so you can flex that you were subscribed to License to Game before I was cool. Thank you for watching, and until next time, I'll see you in a bit.